She didn't come home looking for the past, but the past was waiting. Olivia Carter, a former Army medic, came back only to bury her foster mother, and found herself inheriting a house no one had lived in for 30 years, a house built on water and silence. Beneath the creaking floorboards, she uncovered a diary, a faded photograph, and a truth her family had died to protect. Now, with only her loyal German shepherd by her side, Olivia must face what was left behind, a legacy written in love, loss, and the courage to come home again. What she discovers beneath the water will change everything she believes about who she is, and who was watching over her all along. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Chapter 1. The Letter and the Dog That Led Her Home. The air over southern Louisiana was thick with moisture, and the scent of rain-soaked magnolia leaves. The funeral crowd had dispersed hours ago, leaving only the slow whisper of wind and the sound of frogs waking in the marsh. Olivia Carter stood before a freshly filled grave, her shoulders drawn tight beneath a faded military jacket. At 38, she had the lean, wiry frame of someone who'd spent years surviving rather than living. Her hair was a deep chestnut brown, cut unevenly at the shoulders, streaked with threads of gray that glimmered in the late light. Her skin bore the faint bronze of a woman long exposed to sun and dust, while a small scar curved from her left cheek toward her jaw, a memory from a field hospital in Afghanistan where a wall had collapsed during a storm. Her eyes, a piercing gray-green, seemed too alert for a woman standing still. The gravestone in front of her read Sarah Morgan, 1952-24. Sarah had been her foster mother, the only person who had ever managed to quiet the restless chaos in Olivia's heart. Sarah was a petite woman, once strong and radiant, whose body had withered under illness. Her hair, once auburn, had turned the color of snow before she died, and her skin had grown thin and pale, like rice paper. But even in her final days, Sarah's voice had carried warmth, the kind that wrapped around broken souls like a soft quilt. She had rescued Olivia from the foster system when the girl was 16, already half feral from years of bouncing between temporary homes. Sarah had a way of speaking that made even silence feel safe. Now that voice was gone, and Olivia stood adrift, a soldier without a war, a daughter without a mother. At her feet lay Ranger, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a dense coat of black and tan, his body muscled but not bulky, every movement controlled. His amber eyes were always on her, protective, questioning, and calm. He'd once been a search and rescue dog, trained to locate survivors in collapsed buildings, until a hurricane mission left him trapped for 2 days beneath a shattered pier. Olivia had been the medic who found him, half-conscious, bleeding, yet still wagging his tail when she called his name. She had kept him after that, both of them bearing scars no one could see. When she moved, he moved. When she paused, he stilled. Ranger was not just her dog. He was the pulse that steadied her when her own heart faltered. After the funeral, Olivia drove Sarah's old Ford pickup down the cracked road to the edge of the property. The rain had left puddles that reflected the bruised sky, and the cicadas were already screaming in the trees. Inside the house, the smell of peppermint tea and cedar lingered faintly, ghosts of Sarah's quiet domestic rituals. The furniture was covered in linen sheets, and dust particles swam through golden light like tired stars. Olivia didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears were luxuries best saved for safer places. She removed her jacket, hung it on the same hook Sarah used for her straw hat, and sank into the chair by the kitchen table. That was when she saw it. A thick manila envelope sitting neatly in the center of the table, its edges softened by time. A blue notary seal gleamed under the lamp. Her name, Olivia Carter, was written in ink that had begun to fade, as if whoever wrote it had done so long before this day. She hesitated before opening it. Ranger watched, ears twitching. Olivia exhaled and slit the envelope with a paring knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a legal letterhead from Boudreaux and Green Law Offices, Baton Rouge. The letter was brief, formal. To Ms. Olivia Carter, you are identified as the sole legal heir to the property known as Carter House and the surrounding parcel of land located in Bayou Mercy, Louisiana. This inheritance follows the will of May Carter, deceased, dated 95. The words blurred for a moment as Olivia blinked. May Carter. She didn't know the name. Her mother's maiden name, at least on record, had been simply unknown. The state files listed her biological parents as unidentified. She turned the paper over, half expecting a mistake, a note saying they had confused her for someone else. But there it was again, her full name, date of birth, and an address she had never seen. She whispered, almost to herself, "Who the hell is May Carter?" Ranger lifted his head, tail thumping once against the floor, as if recognizing the shift in her voice. Olivia read the document again, slower this time. It described a small parcel of land, roughly 12 acres, somewhere deep in the marshlands near the Gulf, accessible only by an old service road. The letter also mentioned personal effects and family belongings stored within the property. A small sketch map was attached, drawn in precise pen strokes, showing the curve of a bayou and a small structure labeled Carter House. For a long time, she just sat there, the ceiling fan groaning above. Part of her wanted to toss the letter into the trash and forget it existed. She'd spent most of her life moving forward, from one base to another, one city to the next, believing the past was a locked door better left sealed. Yet now, that door had cracked open, and she could feel something behind it breathing. Her mind drifted back to Sarah. The woman had always avoided questions about Olivia's birth parents. "Some things you're better off not knowing, Liv," she'd said once, her frail hand covering Olivia's. But what if that wasn't true? What if this inheritance, was the very thing Sarah had tried to protect her from, or the thing she wanted Olivia to find when she was strong enough to face it? Olivia looked at the clock. 9:30. The room was too quiet. She poured herself a glass of whiskey, the same brand Sarah kept for cold nights and bad memories. Ranger patted over and rested his chin on her knee. She stared down at him. "What do you think, partner? One last road trip?" He responded with a low, approving rumble, his tail brushing against the worn wooden floor. The next morning, the sun rose heavy and orange over the marsh. Olivia loaded her truck with a duffel bag, a first aid kit, a canteen, and Sarah's old compass, a brass thing that barely pointed north anymore. She buckled Ranger into the passenger seat and started the engine. The truck coughed, groaned, then rumbled to life. The old highway stretched ahead like a faded scar cutting through endless green. She hadn't planned to stay long, maybe a day or two, just enough to see the house, sign whatever papers she needed to, and move on. Yet somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of cynicism and fatigue, something flickered. A fragile ember of hope, the idea that perhaps there was still a place in the world that belonged to her. Hours later, the landscape changed. The paved road turned to gravel, then to dirt, lined by cypress trees and the smell of brine. The sign welcoming her to Bayou Mercy was cracked, the paint peeling, the population number crossed out. She slowed the truck as the GPS went blank and the radio turned to static. The world seemed to hold its breath. Ranger sat upright, ears pricked. Ahead, a lone heron lifted off the water, white wings cutting through mist. Olivia followed the narrow road until it ended at a rusted gate and a mailbox so old the name Carter had been nearly erased by rain. She stepped out, mud sucking at her boots. The house was barely visible beyond the reeds, a silhouette raised on wooden stilts, its windows black and hollow. A strange chill traced her spine. The air smelled of salt and rot. She reached out to open the gate when Ranger growled, low and guttural. Olivia froze. The dog's hackles were raised, his gaze fixed on the shadowed porch. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement there, something small, quick, retreating into the dark. She whispered, "Easy, boy." But Ranger didn't relax. His growl deepened. Then, from somewhere inside the house came a faint sound. Not wind, not water, something metallic, like a chain dragged across the floor. Olivia's pulse spiked. The letter crinkled in her jacket pocket as she took a slow step forward. "Hello?" she called out, but only the echo of her own voice returned, swallowed by the marsh. The sound came again, louder this time. Ranger's bark shattered the silence. And then, just as suddenly, everything went still. Chapter 2. The House on the Water and the Man Who Remembered. By morning the fog had thinned, though the marsh still glistened with a sheen of damp light. The air smelled faintly metallic, as if the bayou itself exhaled secrets through the reeds. Olivia Carter stood at the edge of the dock, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, soaked wood. The house before her was nothing like she'd imagined when she read the words Carter Property in that legal letter. It wasn't a southern mansion framed by white columns. It was a skeletal structure raised high on wooden stilts above murky water the color of tarnished silver. The walls were weathered gray, shingles peeled like old skin, and one window hung crookedly on its hinge, swaying gently with each gust of wind. Still, there was something arresting about it, the lonely kind of beauty that only ruins possess. The hand-painted sign nailed to the porch beam read, barely legible through moss and age, Carter House, Est, 1954. She stared at the name for a long time. Carter. It wasn't just a surname on government documents anymore. It was carved into wood, sunk deep into Louisiana humidity, and maybe into her blood. Ranger sniffed the ground near the dock. The dog's black and tan coat rippled as he tensed, his tail stiff, head low. Olivia crouched, running a hand through his fur. "What is it, boy?" He let out a low growl, not of fear, but warning. Olivia followed his gaze. There were footprints, fresh ones, in the mud leading from the dock to the steps of the porch. The rain from last night hadn't yet erased them. They were larger than her own, boot prints with a square heel, the kind worn by men who spent their lives on boats or construction yards. She felt her instincts rise, the soldier still living under her civilian skin. Whoever had been here wasn't long gone. She scanned the waterline, nothing but rippling reflections of cypress trunks and the occasional darting fish. The bayou could hide anything, snakes, men, or ghosts. Then came the low rumble of a motorboat engine. She straightened, hand instinctively moving near the pocket knife clipped to her jeans. The small vessel came into view, faded green hull, netting piled at the bow. The man steering it cut the engine and let the boat glide toward the dock. He was old, perhaps in his 70s, with the kind of leathery skin that came from a lifetime under the Louisiana sun. His face was lined like cracked river clay, a silver beard shadowed his jaw, and his eyes were a piercing blue-gray, sharp as oyster shells. His clothes, loose denim shirt, faded overalls, and a sun-bleached baseball cap that once had a logo, were worn but clean. He lifted one hand in greeting. "Morning," he said, his accent thick and slow, soaked in bayou cadence. "Didn't mean to startle you, ma'am. Name's Earl Boudreaux." Olivia didn't lower her guard. "You from around here?" Earl gave a dry laugh. "Born right down the bend. Haven't left since Nixon was in office. Folks call me the old swamp rat. I prefer caretaker. Been keeping an eye on this place a long while." He nodded toward the house behind her. "Didn't think I'd ever see a Carter back here." Olivia blinked. "You know this property?" "Know it," he said, stepping off the boat onto the dock with surprising steadiness for his age. "Miss May Carter was the toughest woman I ever met. She built this house with her own hands alongside her husband, James. Fine people. Folks round here still tell stories about 'em. But then—" He stopped, eyes narrowing toward the house. "Then they vanished. Overnight. Must have been, 94 or 95. I was younger and dumb enough to ask too many questions." "What happened to them?" Olivia asked, voice quieter now. Earl's gaze lingered on the water before answering. "Depends who you ask. Some say they skipped town when the oil companies started buying up land cheap. Others say, well, others whisper darker things. All I know is, one day, this place was full of laughter, and the next, nothing but silence. I promised May, if the last Carter ever came back, I'd make sure they knew the truth before the wrong folks found them." Olivia's chest tightened. "The last Carter?" He looked at her with something between pity and recognition. "That'd be you, wouldn't it?" Her throat went dry. "How did you know who I was?" Earl smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ain't many strangers drive all the way out here with a shepherd like that, and eyes that look just like May's." For a long moment, Olivia said nothing. Ranger sat between them, his head turning from one to the other, as if measuring intent. Finally, she broke the silence. "So, you knew my family. What kind of people were they?" Earl scratched his beard, thinking. "Hard-working, proud. The Carters weren't rich, but they built good things. Wooden toys, furniture, carvings, all by hand. Sold them to tourists and fishermen. Your great-grandfather James, he had a knack for detail. Could make a pelican look alive from a block of cypress wood. But after that night, the one where I heard shouting across the water and saw lights moving where they shouldn't have been, they were gone. Whole damn family. What about the land taxes? The property upkeep?" Earl shrugged. "Funny thing. Been paid every year, like clockwork. No one knows from where. I figured May arranged something before she passed." He paused, then added more quietly, "Sometimes I come by and fix what I can." replace a board, patch a leak, didn't want the place to fall apart entirely. Olivia glanced toward the house again. I appreciate that. It's more than I expected. He tilted his head. You planning to stay a while? I haven't decided, she admitted. I came to see it for myself. Maybe clean up a bit, figure out what all this means. Earl gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. Just be careful, Ms. Carter. The bayou remembers everything, but not all memories want to be found. Her pulse quickened at the cryptic tone. What do you mean? Earl adjusted his cap, his weathered hands trembling slightly. From or from something heavier, she couldn't tell. Let's just say there are folks who think this house still holds something valuable, and I ain't talking antiques. Before she could ask, he climbed back into his boat. If you need anything, my place is down that way. He pointed toward a line of cypress trees. You'll see the lantern on my dock after dark. Don't wait too long to visit. Then he started the engine and drifted away, his figure shrinking into mist until he disappeared completely. Olivia watched until he was gone, her mind spinning. She turned to Ranger. What do you think? Harmless old man or swamp prophet? The dog gave no answer, only sniffed the air, ears pricked toward the house again. Inside, the floorboards creaked like bones shifting under her feet. The interior smelled of mildew, old paper, and faint lavender, the ghost of whoever last lived here. The furniture was still there, draped in dusty sheets. Cobwebs bridged the corners of windows, and a single rocking chair faced the bayou, unmoving. She ran her hand across the mantel and felt grit under her fingertips. Above it hung a framed photograph, the glass cracked but intact. It showed a man and woman, perhaps James and May Carter, standing on the porch, smiling proudly beside a little girl with curly hair and a toy dog at her feet. Olivia swallowed. The girl's eyes looked disturbingly familiar. Outside, the wind picked up again. The boards moaned. Ranger's ears went flat, and he let out a low whine. Olivia turned toward him. Hey, it's okay. Then she heard it, a soft thud from somewhere beneath the floorboards. Not the creak of settling wood, not the scurry of an animal. Heavier, deliberate. Ranger barked once, sharp and loud, echoing off the walls. Olivia froze. The sound came again. She knelt, pressing her palm against the floor. Cold air seeped up through the cracks. And then, beneath her fingertips, something, or someone, knocked back. Chapter 3. The Hidden Floorboard and the Ghosts Beneath. The morning light over Bayou Mercy was pale and bruised, filtered through a thin fog that clung to the cypress branches like breath that refused to fade. The air smelled of salt and wet bark, the kind of dampness that seeps into skin and memory alike. Olivia Carter stood barefoot on the warped porch planks, her coffee untouched beside her. The night had left her restless. That faint knocking sound under the floor had haunted every shallow dream. Now, only Ranger seemed sure of what to do. The German shepherd trotted ahead, his nose low to the ground, tracing invisible trails across the porch. His fur shimmered in dull gold under the gray light, his body moving with precise purpose. Olivia watched him circle, then stop abruptly near the far end of the porch, where the wood darkened from rain. He began to dig with one paw, claws scraping gently at a specific spot between two boards. "What is it, boy?" she asked, crouching beside him. The board beneath her hand felt different, smoother, as if it had been replaced long after the others. She pressed lightly, and the plank shifted ever so slightly, giving beneath her touch. It wasn't nailed down. Instead, it was slotted with the precision of a carpenter's hand. Clever, careful, intentional. She grabbed a flathead screwdriver from her bag, wedged it under the board, and lifted. The piece came up easily, revealing a small cavity underneath. The smell of old wood and something faintly metallic wafted out. Inside lay a small tin box, its edges rusted and dented, wrapped in a thin cloth that had once been blue but had long faded to gray. Beside it was a notebook, bound in oiled canvas, and a photograph tucked neatly between them. Olivia's heart thudded as she lifted the photo into the light. It was black and white, the image soft and time-worn. 3 people stood on this very porch. A woman with silver hair tied in a kerchief, her eyes kind but determined. A little girl with curls and a German shepherd puppy in her arms, and a man standing slightly apart, his body half-turned as though caught off guard. The woman's handwriting on the back, faded but legible, read, "May Carter," and beneath it, one single word, Olivia. Her name. Her breath caught. Her whole body seemed to freeze in the humid air. She stared at the little girl, the curls, the bright grin, that small hand clutching the dog's fur. Something twisted in her chest. She didn't remember this moment, didn't recognize these people, yet every instinct told her it was real. Someone had known her long before she knew herself. Ranger sat beside her, silent now, sensing the tremor in her hands. She opened the notebook. The pages, though yellowed, were well preserved, coated in oil to resist moisture. The handwriting inside was elegant, looping in careful cursive. The first page began with a name, May Carter's Journal, 1989. Olivia read, slowly, the words pulling her deeper into a past she hadn't asked to reclaim. They said nothing good comes from the southern bayou, but they were wrong. This land gives and it remembers. Yet sometimes, what it gives back is not what you expect. James and I found something under the South Marsh, a metal crate caught in the roots. Looked military at first glance, but too refined, too deliberate. Inside were strange machines, cables, boxes with blinking lights, even though they hadn't been connected to power in years. Ray said not to tell anyone. He said the water would keep its secrets better than any man could. Olivia frowned. Ray, the name from the photograph. She turned the page. I wanted to report it. James said leave it. Ray begged us not to bring the law into it. Said the wrong kind of attention would ruin us. He was right. Not long after, men came asking questions. Men who didn't smell like fishermen. Suits, guns under coats, even in summer heat. They wanted to know if we'd seen anything. James lied. I prayed they believed him. Olivia's eyes moved faster now. The rumors spread that we'd found something valuable, something worth killing for. Ray said he'd seen the same kind of men near the docks 2 nights ago, hauling barrels with the same markings as the crate. He warned us, don't dangle what others crave. They'll take more than your catch. She flipped further, and the tone changed. The loops of handwriting sharper, more frantic. They came last night. I woke to the sound of engines, saw headlights through the reeds. Shots fired. The air smelled of gasoline. James shouted for me to take the girl and run. I didn't look back. Ray stayed behind to cover us. I don't know if he made it. We left everything, the house, the name, even the family graves. If she survives, if she grows up away from this cursed place, tell her we loved her enough to let her forget. But she must remember one day, when the greedy return for what they lost. Olivia closed the notebook, her fingers trembling. Her pulse was a thunder beneath her skin. The world outside was silent, except for the steady hum of insects and the soft lap of the tide. She looked again at the photograph, tracing May's face. The woman's eyes, sharp, gentle, fearless, seemed to look straight through time and into her own. She whispered, "You tried to protect me." Ranger nudged her knee gently, grounding her, but the words from the journal kept echoing. "They'll come back." She felt the first ripple of unease crawl through her spine. If May had buried something dangerous, something men had killed for, and Olivia had just unearthed the trail, then maybe the danger wasn't buried at all. Her thoughts snapped back when Ranger growled, low and guttural. He was facing the marsh again, ears erect. Olivia stood slowly, following his gaze. A small boat was drifting by, silent, unpowered, its oar movements deliberate but almost invisible. She caught a glimpse of a man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, hat pulled low, face hidden by distance. The boat moved past the reeds, too slow to be accidental. Olivia felt the air grow heavy. She reached for her phone. No signal. By the time she blinked, the boat had vanished. Only ripples remained. She gathered the notebook and photo, hiding them back inside the tin box, then slipped it under her jacket. "Come on, Ranger," she whispered. They went inside, bolting the door behind them, even though she knew it wouldn't stop much if someone truly wanted in. The rest of the day passed in uneasy silence. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not by ghosts, but by eyes just out of sight. When the sun fell, she lit a single lantern and sat at the old kitchen table, May's words open before her. The ink shimmered faintly in the light, and one phrase seemed almost to pulse from the page. "The water remembers." Ranger lay near the doorway, ears twitching, but for once not asleep. Outside, the frogs had gone silent. That was what chilled her most, the quiet. Even the bayou seemed to be listening. And then, from beneath the floorboards, came the faintest sound, like something shifting in the darkness below. A scrape, a breath, a whisper of movement. Olivia held her breath, every nerve alive. She rose slowly, the lantern shaking in her hand. "Hello?" she called, her voice low. No answer. Ranger stood now, hackles raised, teeth bared toward the floor. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped, replaced by a soft, deliberate tapping. 3 knocks, then silence. Chapter 4. The Men in the Dark and the Flight Through Reeds. The night crept over Bayou Mercy in thick folds of mist. The air was heavy with the smell of salt and wet grass, and the water beneath the house reflected only the faint, trembling glow of the lantern inside. Olivia sat at the old wooden table, May's notebook open in front of her, the ink still glistening faintly under the light. Ranger lay near the door, ears twitching, his breath slow but alert. The silence had a strange texture, too deep, too deliberate. Even the frogs had gone quiet, as if holding their breath with her. Then came the low hum of an engine, faint at first, then growing, a guttural churning sound that rolled across the water. Ranger's head shot up, his body tense. Olivia froze. The hum grew louder until it broke into the distinct rhythm of a motorboat idling near the dock. She blew out the lantern, plunging the room into darkness. Her heart raced, her training kicking in. Through the crack of the window shutters, she saw 2 beams of light sweep across the yard, flashlights cutting through fog. 2 men stood at the edge of the porch. They were not locals. Their clothes were too clean, their movements too coordinated. One was tall, built like a man used to giving orders, his black jacket slick with moisture, his jaw square and unshaven. The other was shorter, leaner, wearing a baseball coat pulled low over close-cropped blonde hair, his nervous energy showing in the way he tapped his flashlight against his thigh. Both had accents foreign to the bayou, the clipped, cold tone of men who dealt in cash, not community. "Hey!" the tall one shouted. "We know you're in there, Miss Carter." His voice echoed over the water. "Why don't you make this easy and hand over what you found? The notebook. The thing under the floor. We ain't here to hurt you, unless we have to." Olivia crouched behind the window frame, her breath shallow. She could see the glint of something metallic in the tall man's hand. A gun, small and compact. These weren't fishermen, they were hunters. The shorter one spoke next, his tone almost mocking. "We told you people to leave this alone decades ago. Guess curiosity runs in the family." Ranger growled softly, the sound low and vibrating in his chest. Olivia placed a hand on his neck, whispering, "Easy, boy." Her mind raced. They couldn't stay. The house had only one way out besides the front, the narrow wooden walkway that led into the small canoe Earl had left under the porch. She waited, counting their footsteps. 1, 2. The boards creaked under their boots as they moved along the outer deck. She heard the tall man mutter, "Check the back." Now. Olivia slid open the trapdoor in the kitchen floor, the same one May had once used to store fishing nets. She grabbed the tin box and the notebook, slinging her duffel bag across her shoulder. "Down," she whispered. Ranger obeyed instantly, lowering himself to his belly, his body moving as silent as shadow. Together they slipped through the narrow space, lowering themselves onto the small wooden canoe. The air under the house was damp and close, smelling of moss and iron. Olivia pushed gently off the support post, using her hand instead of the oar to avoid sound. The canoe drifted slowly into the dark water. Above, the men's voices carried faintly. "She's gone," the short one hissed. "The dog, too." "Find her," the tall man snapped. "She can't have gone far." Olivia's muscles burned from holding still. Every splash sounded too loud in her ears. The reeds closed around them, tall and whispering, swallowing light. Ranger's head rested against her knee, eyes glinting faintly in the dark. She could feel the rhythm of his heartbeat, steady, grounding. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The men's flashlights flickered between the stalks of cattail, moving closer, then farther away. Olivia's breathing slowed to match the rhythm of the marsh. She'd learned this calm in war zones, the quiet space between fear and action. She let instinct take over. When the sound of the motor roared again, she knew they were sweeping the shoreline. The water near her rippled as a beam of light skimmed across its surface. She ducked low, pulling the canoe deeper into the reeds. Ranger stayed utterly still. The beam passed inches from her face, glancing off the surface of the water before swinging away. Then, a sound she didn't expect. A single gunshot, distant but unmistakable. The flash illuminated the fog for a fraction of a second. The men were firing into the water, not to hit her, to scare her out. The second shot came closer. A bullet sliced into a wooden post nearby, sending a splash over her hand. Ranger snarled, but didn't move. "Come out, Miss Carter," the tall man called again. "You're not gonna last long out there. This bayou's full of things worse than us." Olivia's jaw tightened. He's wrong, she thought. I've lived through worse. She grabbed the oar now and began to paddle, slow, silent strokes, toward the shadowy outline of the opposite bank. She remembered May's words. The water remembers. Maybe it would protect her too. The chase continued until the lights behind her faded, replaced by the croak of frogs and the sigh of wind through reeds. Only then did she stop, muscles trembling, breath sharp in her chest. She rested the oar across her lap and stared back toward the house. Smoke, faint but real, was rising above it. They'd set something on fire. Her hands clenched. That house was her first glimpse of belonging, and now it was being erased. She fought the urge to turn back. She couldn't. Not yet. The reeds parted ahead, revealing a narrow creek that glowed faintly with reflected moonlight. She followed it, letting the current carry her until a small lantern flickered on a distant dock. Her pulse quickened. Earl's house. As she approached, she saw him waiting, the light from his porch lamp casting long shadows over his worn face. Earl Boudreaux looked older than he had the day before, or maybe the truth of what he'd kept buried had aged him overnight. He wore a wool shirt despite the humidity, sleeves rolled to reveal sinewy forearms marked by old scars. His eyes, pale and steady, met hers. "Jesus, girl," he muttered, helping her tie the canoe. "I was hoping you'd come, but not like this. I heard shots." "They're looking for something," Olivia said, voice hoarse. "They knew my name. They said to hand over the notebook." Earl's expression darkened. He glanced at Ranger, who had climbed onto the dock beside Olivia, dripping water, fur slicked to his ribs. "So it started again," Earl murmured. "I told May this place would draw them back one day." "Who are they?" Olivia demanded. He hesitated, eyes flickering toward the dark water. Men from the old days, not lawmen, not criminals either. Something in between. They called themselves contractors. Back in the 80s, they moved cargo through this bayou, things meant to disappear. The Carters found one of their shipments. They didn't forgive that. Olivia stared at him, the pieces finally connecting. "So, the crate May wrote about belonged to them," he finished grimly. "And if they think you've got it, they won't stop until they're sure you don't." The silence stretched, broken only by the slow creak of the dock beneath their feet. Olivia wiped water from her face, adrenaline slowly giving way to exhaustion. She looked toward the dark horizon where smoke still faintly rose. "They burned the house." Earl nodded once, jaw tightening. "Then we best make sure they don't burn the truth next." He turned, motioning toward his cabin. "Come inside. We've got talking to do, and not much time to do it." Olivia followed him, Ranger close behind, the night pressing in around them like the closing of a book not yet finished. Chapter 5. The Ones Who Chose to Stand. The first gray streaks of dawn crept over the bayou, turning the water into a dull mirror of smoke and silver. The night had burned itself out, leaving the world soaked in silence. Olivia Carter sat on the edge of Earl Boudreaux's porch, still damp from the chase. Her clothes smelled faintly of river mud and smoke, her hands stained with soot from what was left of her family's home. Ranger lay at her feet, his fur matted and wet, head resting on his paws but eyes open, always watching. Earl's shack was small, built from weather-beaten planks and lined with nets, tools, and the sweet bitterness of coffee and machine oil. The place smelled like history, like a man who had outlived too many storms. Earl moved slowly but purposefully around the kitchen, pouring coffee into enamel mugs with hands that trembled slightly. He handed one to Olivia, then leaned against the counter, his gaze sharp despite the exhaustion in his bones. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "You stirred up ghosts that don't like waking." I didn't wake them," Olivia muttered, staring into the coffee's dark reflection. "They never slept." Before Earl could answer, a faint knock came at the door. Deliberate, steady. Ranger lifted his head and gave a low rumble, but Olivia's hand on his neck calmed him. Earl crossed the room, opened the door, and sunlight spilled in along with a tall woman dressed in a khaki sheriff's jacket. She was striking, around 42, with copper-toned skin and jet-black hair pulled into a low braid that brushed her shoulder. Her posture was sharp, almost military, though though her expression carried a weight that only comes from fighting too many losing battles. Her name was Marisol Vega, and she had the eyes of someone who had seen this bayou's beauty and its rot, both up close. "Earl," she greeted, her voice husky from years of shouting orders over engines and storms. "You called, said there was trouble." Earl gestured toward Olivia. "This here's the Carter girl, the one May talked about." Marisol's gaze landed on Olivia, measuring, assessing. "I heard the old house burned," she said. "You're lucky to be alive." Olivia nodded stiffly. "Two men came last night. They wanted something my family left behind. They knew my name." Marisol's expression didn't change, but a muscle in her jaw ticked. "Describe them." One tall, clean-cut black jacket, the other blonde, smaller, twitchy, both armed, not locals. Marisol sighed. "Figures. There have been whispers, people poking around the South Bayou, saying they're surveyors, but they ain't looking for land. They're looking for something they lost a long time ago." She walked further inside, the boards creaking beneath her boots. Up close, Olivia noticed the faint scar cutting across Marisol's left eyebrow, the kind that comes from a fight that didn't end quick. She carried herself with a weary authority, the kind of woman who had to earn respect twice as odd for being both a cop and a woman in a dying town. Marisol glanced at the notebook lying on the table. "That May Carter's handwriting?" Olivia nodded and slid it toward her. Marisol flipped through a few pages, her eyes narrowing as she read. "Jesus, I thought this was just a story. My father used to talk about a night when the marsh lit up with gunfire. He said no one ever talked about it again." "It wasn't just a story," Olivia said. "They found something, a metal container. It sank in the South Marsh. May wrote that it was full of electronics, contraband, maybe government tech. Whatever it was, people died to hide it." Marisol looked up sharply. "And now people are dying to find it again." Ranger barked once, as if agreeing. Earl poured another round of coffee. "You see, Marisol, this ain't about ghosts or curses. It's about greed. Same kind that poisoned this place 30 years ago." Marisol set the mug down. "If that's true, we can't let them dig it up. But I can't move on hearsay. I'll need to see the site myself." Olivia's instincts stiffened. "You think I'm making this up?" "I think," Marisol said carefully, "you just ran for your life through a swamp in the dark. I think you believe what you're saying. But if we're going to stand a chance, we need evidence. Something we can show before those men rewrite history again." Earl nodded. "She's right. If we can prove what's under there, maybe it'll buy you protection. Maybe even justice for May." Olivia studied Marisol, the steady eyes, the way her hand never strayed far from the holster at her side. She was used to fighting alone, like Olivia. And maybe that's why, when Marisol said, "I need you as a witness and an ally, not a victim," something deep in Olivia shifted. No one had ever said it like that before. She extended her hand. "Then let's go get the truth." Marisol took it, firm and sure. "We'll head out after the sun's high. We'll do this clean. No sneaking this time." By late morning, the three of them, Olivia, Marisol, and Earl, were back at the burned remains of the Carter house. The smoke had died, but the air still carried the sour tang of ash. The wooden stilts were blackened. The porch half collapsed into the water. Ranger prowled the perimeter, nose to the ground. Marisol crouched near a set of footprints hardened in the drying mud. Heavy boots, square tread. She snapped a photo on her phone, then pointed to a cigarette butt half buried nearby. "Imported brand, not local stock. Looks like they waited for you to run," she muttered. "Wanted to scare you off, not kill you. Yet." Earl scowled. "They're getting bold, coming this close." Marisol straightened. "We're heading to the South Marsh after this. That's where May said the container sank, right?" Olivia nodded. "A mile downriver, near the old fishing posts." The journey there was quiet. The water shimmered under the afternoon sun, dragonflies darting between reeds. Despite the beauty, tension hung thick, the kind that made every ripple sound like a warning. When they reached the area as May described, it didn't look like much, just endless reeds and a patch of still water reflecting the sky. Earl turned off the motor. "This is it," he said softly. "Used to be deeper before the sediment built up." Marisol leaned over the side, her reflection fractured by ripples. "There's something under there," she murmured. "You can feel it, like the water's holding its breath." Olivia used a long metal pole Earl handed her to prod the waterbed. It sank deeper than expected, then clanged against something solid. Metal. Marisol's eyes met hers. That sounds older than both of us. Earl sighed, rubbing his jaw. That's your container, all right. Been sitting there rusting for decades. But if those men know it's still down here, they'll be back, Olivia finished. Marisol nodded grimly. Then we'll be ready for them. She turned to Olivia. You're not alone anymore, you hear me? Whatever this is, we end it here. Olivia looked out across the silent marsh, the sun reflecting like fire on the water's surface. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the world was against her. Beside her stood a man who kept his word, and a woman who refused to look away from danger. And at her feet, Ranger stood guard, his eyes steady, his body coiled, loyal as breath itself. Somewhere beneath them, the past waited, sleeping in its steel coffin under 30 years of silt and secrets, but not for much longer. Chapter 6, The Truth That Rose from the Water. The morning broke with a strange quiet, the kind that comes after storms when the world seems to hold its breath. The air above Bayou Mercy shimmered faintly, heavy with mist, and the cypress branches swayed in the slow rhythm of the tide. Olivia Carter stood at the edge of the dock beside Earl's boat, her reflection rippling in the green-gray water. Ranger sat beside her, tense but still, eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting danger to step out from behind the reeds. Earl's old fishing boat, patched and dented, rocked gently against its rope. The smell of oil and river mud mixed with the faint metallic tang of something buried too long. Marisol Vega checked her camera, a police-issued handheld with the kind of scratches that told of years in the field. She tied her hair back, slid on her mirrored sunglasses, and looked at Olivia. You sure you want to see this through? Olivia met her gaze. I didn't come this far to turn back. Earl grunted approvingly. The old man's skin looked darker under the rising sun, each wrinkle carved deep by a lifetime of wind and salt. His eyes, however, were sharp, alive in a way that made him seem 20 years younger. Then let's bring it up, he said, pushing the boat off the dock with his boot. They glided through the narrow channel, the motor humming low. The reeds whispered as they passed, brushing against the hull like ghosts reaching out. The air was thick and humming with the drone of insects. Marisol steered, one hand steady on the throttle, her jaw clenched in quiet focus. Earl crouched at the bow with a long wooden pole, scanning the water's surface. Olivia sat near the middle, May Carter's notebook clutched in her lap, open to the final page, the one that mentioned the South Water, where the metal sleeps. Ranger's ears flicked, his nose lifted to the wind, nostrils flaring, as if he too could smell what waited below. Earl tapped the pole into the water every few feet, listening for the sound he remembered from long ago. There was something strange here back then, he muttered. Water went sour, fish floated up. May said the land itself was sick for months. The first metallic clank came faint, echoing beneath the surface. Earl froze. He struck again. Clank, clank, hollow, heavy. That's it, he whispered. Right there. Marisol set the motor to idle and grabbed her phone. We'll record everything. No shortcuts, no misunderstandings. If this goes up the chain, it has to be clean. Olivia nodded, her pulse rising. Together, she and Earl worked the pole hooks into the soft mud, straining to catch whatever was buried. It took minutes, or perhaps lifetimes, but at last something massive shifted under the surface. Bubbles rose. Then, slowly, a rectangular edge broke through the green water, metal coated in mud and oyster shells, breathing for the first time in decades. Earl and Olivia heaved, muscles trembling, until the crate rolled onto the deck with a wet thud. The air around them smelled like rust, algae, and old secrets. Marisol zoomed in with the camera. State your names, she said. Earl Boudreaux, the old man said, wiping his brow. Olivia Carter, she added, voice shaking. Marisol spoke into the lens. Recovering sealed container, approximate weight 100 pounds, location, Bayou Mercy South Marsh, coordinates logged, witnessed by Sheriff Marisol Vega and civilians Carter and Boudreaux. Earl looked at her. You always this official? Marisol cracked the faintest smile, only when the truth's this heavy. They pried the crate open. The hinges resisted, squealing like something alive, but finally gave. Inside lay no treasure, no gold, no drugs, just files sealed in plastic, old hard drives, and binders marked with faded government logos. Olivia frowned. It's paperwork? Marisol leaned closer, flipping through the first binder, her brow furrowed. Not just paperwork. Look at this. Payment ledgers, coded transfers, defense contractor IDs. These are bribes. Lists of shipments tied to military hardware sold off book. She pulled out a manila folder so soaked through the ink had bled into the paper. These names, they're politicians, engineers, private military firms. Earl exhaled slowly. So May and her family weren't protecting stolen goods. They were protecting the truth. Olivia's throat tightened. They ran because they knew too much. Marisol nodded grimly. And they paid the price for someone else's crime. Jesus Christ, this isn't just old history. Some of these companies still exist. Olivia ran her hand along the lid of the crate, fingers tracing the rust. Every nerve in her body seemed to hum. May didn't leave me, she thought. She hid me where they couldn't find me. Her heart swelled with something deeper than grief, a fierce gratitude, raw and clean. They didn't abandon me, she whispered. They saved me. Ranger pressed his head against her knee, as if understanding. Marisol pulled out her radio and contacted dispatch. Her tone was steady, precise. This is Sheriff Vega requesting immediate state and federal response. We've recovered evidence linked to historical corruption and possible ongoing federal offenses. Secure line, priority 1. There was a pause, static crackling over the speaker. Then a calm voice replied, Copy that, Sheriff. Hold your position. Agents are en route. Marisol met Olivia's eyes. This is going to blow open a lot more than you think. Earl squinted toward the horizon. And it's going to make us targets again. Maybe, Marisol said, but this time they can't bury it, not with all of us watching. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of a distant motor, far away but familiar. Olivia's stomach tightened. She didn't look back. Not yet. Instead, she looked at the crate, the metal beast that had slept underwater longer than she'd been alive, and felt the first fragile sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running. She had something worth standing for. Earl secured the crate with a chain, his movements methodical. We'll wait for the feds here. No sense dragging this any farther. But you realize, girl, you just made yourself the face of a 30-year secret. Olivia smiled faintly. Then let them see me. The sun had climbed higher now, glinting off the water until it looked like glass catching fire. Ranger barked once, loud and clear, the sound echoing across the marsh. Not warning, but proclamation. Olivia turned toward the horizon where the smoke of her burned house was now just a memory. This is my home, she said quietly, and I'm not leaving again. Behind her, the motor's hum grew louder, but Olivia didn't flinch. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what was coming toward her. Because the truth, once risen, never sinks again. Chapter 7. The House of Light and the Road Ahead. Months had passed since the morning the truth surfaced from the dark water of Bayou Mercy. The seasons had turned, trading the heavy rains of spring for the soft golden humidity of summer. The bayou shimmered now, alive with dragonflies and slow breezes that carried the smell of cypress and salt. The house that once stood as a blackened shell was reborn. Boards replaced, porch sanded smooth, walls sealed, and painted the color of warm honey. Its reflection stretched long and calm across the water like a sigh finally released after decades held in. A new wooden sign hung proudly above the steps, carved by hand and polished with linseed oil. The words glowed faintly in the late sunlight. Carter House, since 1954, and still standing. Olivia Carter stood on the porch barefoot, her jeans rolled to the ankles, a mug of coffee steaming in her hand. She looked stronger now. The sharp lines of her face softened, though her eyes still carried that quiet alertness that comes from a life lived in survival mode. Her hair, once perpetually tied back, now fell loosely to her shoulders, streaked with strands of sunlight. Ranger lay near her feet, his coat glossy, the black and tan fur catching the afternoon light. He was older now, a little stiffer in the hips, but still the sentinel of the house. When boats passed in the distance, he had raise his head, watch a moment, then rest again with a satisfied grunt. A dog who knew his territory was finally safe. The Carter property was hers now, officially. The state had verified the old documents, cross-referenced May Carter's last entries with military and corporate archives, and tied everything together with the evidence Marisol had secured. The investigation had gone far beyond Bayou Mercy. Federal agents had come, taken statements, shaken hands, and left with boxes of files. Some astonished, some disturbed. For Olivia, It was strange to watch the world move on while her own had just begun to settle. The townsfolk, once wary of the Carter woman, had warmed to her. Children often stopped by with their parents to see the hero dog, asking if they could pet Ranger or toss him a treat. He'd accept with a solemn dignity, tail thumping like the slow beat of an old drum. To the kids, he was a local legend. To Olivia, he was simply her shadow, her reminder that loyalty didn't always need words. Earl Boudreaux visited nearly every evening, arriving by his small fishing boat that sputtered like an old man clearing his throat. His arrival was always heralded by the scent of fried catfish or boiled shrimp wrapped in newspaper. The old man had grown leaner, but happier, his eyes lighter, without the weight of old secrets. He'd sit on the porch steps with Olivia, watching the light fade over the water. "Never thought I'd see this place alive again," Earl would say, tapping the railing he'd helped repair. "Made me proud, girl. Real proud. She'd scold me for letting the paint dry uneven," Olivia teased once. Earl chuckled, his laugh deep and rough like a motor engine. That too. Sometimes Marisol joined them, always in uniform, though she'd unbutton the top few buttons, letting the evening breeze undo the stiffness of her day. She had become something between a friend and a sister to Olivia. They'd shared too many nights of waiting, too many truths that left scars invisible but mutual. Marisol had her own changes too. Under her guidance, the small sheriff's office of Bayou Mercy began rebuilding trust. Corrupt officials were removed, new funding brought better training, and for the first time in years, people called the sheriff's department for help rather than out of fear. One evening, as the three of them sat watching the sunset, Marisol said, "You know, you've become something of a symbol around here." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Symbol of what? Bad luck?" "No," Marisol smiled. "Of what it looks like when someone stops running. That's rare around here." Olivia looked out toward the glimmering marsh, her reflection ghosting the water's surface. "I didn't stop running," she said softly. "I just changed direction." It was true. She had found purpose again. With Marisol's encouragement, Olivia started hosting small community workshops in the old community hall, teaching first aid, flood response, and basic disaster survival. Her background as a field medic in the Army had given her the skills. Now she used them not to survive war, but to help her neighbors survive storms. At first, only a few people came, a handful of retirees and some teens skipping chores. But word spread quickly that the Carter woman knew how to patch wounds, tie ropes, and calm a panicked child in floodwater. Soon, the sessions filled with fishermen, mothers, and even young deputies from Marisol's team. "Calm saves more lives than courage," Olivia told them once, her voice steady as the slow rain outside. "And both are learned, neither is born." Ranger sat by her side through every class, watching over the crowd as if ensuring everyone behaved. Someone once joked that the dog looked like he was auditing the lesson. By autumn, the Carter house was no longer just a memory of what was lost. It became a gathering place again. On weekends, Earl brought his harmonica, and locals would come with their guitars, filling the porch with slow, aching bayou blues. Children ran along the dock, their laughter echoing over the water. Even the old fishermen, men who once wouldn't utter the Carter name, started tipping their hats when they passed. Inside, above the fireplace, 2 photographs hung side by side. The first, an old, faded picture of May Carter, Ray, and a small, curly-haired girl clutching a German shepherd. The ink was nearly gone, but the emotion still shone through. Love, fierce and unspoken. Second, a new photograph, taken just weeks ago. Olivia standing with Ranger between her and Marisol, Earl to her left. Behind them, the sun burned orange across the bayou. In their eyes, there was the same stubborn pride, the same light. 2 generations. One story of running, returning, and finally belonging. That evening, Olivia placed her hand gently on the frame and whispered, "We're home, May. You can rest now." Ranger stirred at her feet, his tail sweeping the wooden floor softly. She smiled, crouched, and scratched behind his ear. "We're home, Ranger," she said. "You did good." He yawned, then lay down by the door, the picture of peace, a soldier finally allowed to rest by the water he'd guarded. Outside, the lights of the Carter house glowed warm against the coming night, powered by a small solar panel she'd installed herself. The glow reflected on the still bayou water like a promise that would not fade. In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly. Not a threat this time, but a reminder that storms would always come. Olivia looked toward it, her shoulders squared, no longer shrinking from the sound. Because some storms don't destroy, they reveal who's strong enough to rebuild. Sometimes God doesn't answer our prayers with lightning or miracles from the sky. Sometimes He answers through a loyal dog who refuses to leave our side, through strangers who become family, through a house that waited 30 years, just to remind us that we were never truly forgotten. Olivia thought she was lost, but maybe she was simply being led, step by step, back home, to the place where grace had been waiting all along. So, if you're watching this right now and you feel lost, or alone, or unsure where your road leads, remember, even in the quietest corners of your life, God is still working His small miracles. Sometimes, the light you've been searching for is already shining inside your own home. May God bless you and everyone you love. Share this story if it touched your heart. Leave a comment below. Tell us what home means to you. And don't forget to subscribe, so you'll never miss another story of hope, love, and the quiet miracles that surround us every day.